A huge welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Monday. We know the first weekday is incredibly busy, so thank you for choosing us to kick off your week. I'm Munazanjum Faruqi, your host and moderator for today's session. So, for anyone who is new to our space, let me briefly introduce what the Open Community Wikimedia is. We are a recognized user group affiliate of the Wikimedia Foundation. We have a mission that we want to enrich the Wikimedia projects with the deep history, culture, and academic heritage of the global Muslim community. This is the 42nd edition of our DCW Conversation Hour, an open monthly conversation space for all of us to come together. Every session that we keep on holding, it helps us to innovate in the free knowledge space through three simple principles: learning from what works, making steady improvements, and adapting to new challenges to innovate in free knowledge. Let me go over a few housekeeping rules so that everyone has a smooth experience. This session is being recorded, so please do keep your microphones on mute while our guest speaks. The chat box, however, is wide open. Drop your thoughts, your questions, and reflections there at any time. And lastly, we have saved the last 15 minutes exclusively for a live question and answer session. So our session today will focus on the day-to-day operations behind some of the most important administrative roles on our platforms, the stewards, and clear up some common community misconceptions as well along the way. We will also look at the impact of language diversity and communication barriers on global requests. And lastly, break down the requirements for local admin rights into a simple, manageable process. To lead today's session, I am pleased to introduce Martin. His journey in the Wikiverse began in 2005 when he officially registered his widely recognized account, Der Hexe, on the German Wikipedia. Today, he serves as the advisor for communications movement and community at Wikimedia Deutschland. Alongside his stewardship, he has also served as a local administrator for the German Wikipedia, as well as Wikimedia Commons. He is also involved in communicating technical changes, for example, the global accounts. He has organized major community events like the Wikipedia Meets Antiquity Conference and spearheaded multiple photography projects for the German Parliament. He has dedicated an incredible 20 years to the Wikimedia movement. The global movement recently celebrated his dedication by naming him the 2024 Wikimedia Laureate of the Year. Martin also holds the remarkable distinction of being the longest-serving Wikimedia steward in our entire global community. With that, I will hand over the session to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm very happy to share here some insights into the role of stewards and what comes along with this. The first part of the presentation is adapted from a presentation I held together with two fellows at the German Wiki Convention 2024, but we will also do a bit of myth busting later on. I'm particularly happy to have the 42nd conversation hour because most of us know that 42 is a very important number. The first slide I always have is like my introduction because, of course, at the end, I will upload the presentation and those who read it only online will know who I am. Thankfully, I had that wonderful little bit introduction to my pretty long activities and the Wikimedia projects, thanks to Monaza. We can skip that. Stewards. All right. I'm happy to see a few currently active stewards and also a few former stewards in the list of attendees. But I'm pretty sure that not everyone knows what stewards are. So I will give you some quick facts about this. So our group, the people, these stewards are responsible for assigning or removing local rights, assigning blocks, doing some of the most invasive actions on our communities, check use and oversight actions, and help out in project without local users with extended rights. We will dig deeper into that, but that's a quick summary of what they do. And to clarify this, the global impact is pretty huge. Um, as of now, there are 40 stewards. We'll later see where they come from, and they are elected on MetaWiki. You will later also see this. So here on the right on the slide, you'll see one of the original action stewards were supposed to do. The role was introduced pretty early, I think it was 2004, to take off the load from developers in the background, so that whenever on a new wiki administrators show up, they not the developers have to assign these user rights somewhere in the database, but to give trusted users an interface to change user rights. Of course, nowadays, assigning new user rights is mostly handled by bureaucrats, but removing rights, except for a few wikis, is still handled mostly by stewards. There are some rules only they can assign. They already mentioned check user and oversight rights. So these users who can look behind the accounts and see their IP addresses and user agents, so computer data more or less, and to delete the oversighted are the users who delete pages so that even administrators cannot see them anymore. So they're like users who assign and remove rights upon request. And they also do this for roles probably more familiar to you, administrator rights. In particular, on small wikis, they are responsible for doing this, and we will later see how this is exactly managed. You can see here on the next slide another function stewards often use. There, you probably know, there's a list of contributions dedicated to your account where you can see your individual contributions. But this does not only exist for your local project, but also for your global account. Since a couple of years, 2008, later 2014, all accounts are global accounts. That means when you log in, for example, to register on Hindi Wikipedia and then switch to English Wikipedia, you don't have to create another account, as I had to do because I joined before 2008. And this also applies to Wikimedia Commons, Wikidata, and all our other sister projects and sibling projects. And this management of global accounts is only in the hands of stewards. You also have that information. A special central auth is a link for that. It works on any wiki, but only stewards have these extra buttons here in the middle. And I have this here on the this slide here, where you can see the extra buttons stewards have. Stewards can lock accounts, which means they are locked out of their profile. They cannot log in anymore. And they can also remove the account from lists if, in case there are abusive usernames, for example. All of these accounts are handled by stewards. This often is the case when there is some kind of abuse committed by these profiles, like vandalism on not only one wiki, but on multiple wikis, spam bot attacks, and a few things more. So yeah, this is another slide that shows the information you to get when you look for the global account information. All right, what else stewards can do? We can delete Wikipedia. Well, in the sense of we can delete Wikipedia on English Wikipedia, for example, the article of Wikipedia. Despite the fact that there are hundreds of administrators on English Wikipedia, they cannot delete all pages. Some pages are protected from deletion, and this means all these pages that have more than 5,000 revisions. Why is this the case? Because when you delete a page in the database, revisions are moved from one place to another, and this can cause disruption, so that the ability to delete big pages with many revisions, is limited to a very small number of people. And you already understand where we're coming from. When you're looking for a small group with lots of rights, that's probably the stewards. So the stewards have this right called big delete for deleting pages. But we also help out in other places, like when there are global elections or elections for arbitration committees on larger wikis like English Wikipedia. We help with scrutineering these elections, like looking for double votes, attacks on the secure poll extension, etc. Beyond that, we also help the Wikimedia Foundation and the global community in enforcing global bans. There are two kinds of global bans, as just mentioned, the community ones and the Wikimedia Foundation handled ones. And stewards are also entitled to help out finding the global trolls that are banned. We are also first contact for other important global tools like the spam blacklist. You might have heard recently that archive.today, archive.pd, etc. were blacklisted because of abuse happening on these pages, and the global spam blacklist, not exclusively, but mainly is handled by stewards. This also applies to editing or abuse filters. There are a few more things, so a lot of work for stewards to do, but we also split the work among each other, so not everyone is doing everything. We'll later see that. Because our group is pretty tech focused, we're one of the first people that are approached by the Wikimedia Foundation teams working on technology and product, and in this case, the Product Safety and Integrity team, PSI, is working extremely closely with us. Last but not least, here in this slide, we are not only like individual users, but also some of us are organized in own user groups, similar to the Deoband group, the Wikimedia Stewards user group, and I'm one of the co-contacts there. But we're not as active as the Deoband community, for example. Are we the only ones who work on the global field? No, definitely not. When I started as a steward in 2007, it was like that, only stewards around. But over the years, we introduced, advocated for introducing new groups that help us. One of them are the global syshubs. I just mentioned them. They help administrators on the smallest wikis. If you want to become global syshub, you can request it on MetaWiki too. And right now there are about 25 of them. The smaller group, or the less impactful group, bigger group in fact, are the global rollbackers, and they can revert nonsense edits on almost every public Wikimedia wiki, there are exceptions, like English Wikipedia, for example. But yeah, so usually, as of now, the user journey is from someone interested in helping out globally, becoming global rollbacker first, global sysop, and steward. When I became a steward, now this existed as a sense. Like, for me, the user journey was a bit easier. Good. That was part like giving you a summary of what stewards are actually doing. And now I want to dig a little bit deeper into the myth around stewards. And you already heard, like, I also was a little confused. Do I say now we stewards as a group, or are we individuals? Are we a committee? So some of you might say stewards are a committee that makes decisions for global Wikimedia wikis, similar to what the U4C, the Universal Code of Conduct Committee, is doing. Myth busted. That's not correct. Stewards are not a committee. Stewards, like me, are individual volunteers, like most of you. We just have some extra rights, which you just heard, but we are not entitled to just randomly do some actions, but we are there to implement consensus. And consensus on mostly public requests. Of course, there's some tricky situations where we sometimes have to work in the backgrounds, but everything we do happens in a controlled manner. So that's the summary, and now let's look a little bit deeper into what that actually means. Individual stewards, consensus, public requests, controlled. Now we come to the governance parts of stewards. So what it's for me, like having these stewards rights for almost 20 years is a little bit confusing, because you have these rights, as I mentioned, almost everywhere. I can see deleted edits everywhere, and also suppressed edits and so on. And I even have the buttons everywhere to delete and block people and so on. But you might say it's a little bit frustrating, but I'm not allowed to use these buttons in most of the cases, because we have a very strict policy on when I'm, as a steward, allowed to use that. Until 2010, it was even called "Don't Decide." Stewards fully stepping back, always saying that no, it's not on us. We don't do anything. It's just in 2010, I changed this wording to a more reality-checked version, which we then called "Don't Override Consensus." We are there to help communities implementing their consensus, because we have the extra buttons to assign rights, to delete something, and so on. But everything here in Wikimedia projects is also handled under the subsidiarity principle. In case there are local users who can handle something, it's up to them. But if they're not there or need help, then they go to the next level, and when they're climbing the ladder, at some point they will reach the stewards, because they have functionality of everything, more or less, and can help when there's help needed, but not just randomly deciding on something, but there needs to be consensus locally that we implement things. Of course, there are more topics of interest in our policies. Of course, we shouldn't act on our home wikis, for example, with a few exceptions, to avoid conflicts of interest. Everything we do and that can be publicly logged will be publicly logged. We will later see this. And we're absolutely entitled to check local policies. Just because we have the tools to look behind user accounts and to see their IP addresses and user agents. We are, of course, not allowed to do that in local wikis. There are strict rules, for example, on my home wiki, German Wikipedia, when and how to use this check user tool. And we have to go through the lists. What can we do here and there, and act on that. Alongside this policy, we have a handbook with recommendations in case you're interested in digging deeper into what stewards can do and what are the most common cases of work. But we as stewards don't have to look for work, because usually work is taken to us. As you can see, there are 11 request pages, 10, or precisely the last one is for Global Sysops, and more than 10 pages where you can reach out to stewards. They are all listed on MetaWiki, the place where stewards have their home, the Global Coordination Wiki, and they are all dedicated to different tasks. So I already mentioned assigning user rights locally and globally, locking, blocking accounts. This is one of these, committing check user actions on wikis, oversight actions, username changes, and so on and so on. So all these tasks I've already mentioned have separate request pages. We'll look into some of these later, a little bit deeper, just here giving you a summary of how work reaches us. That's one of the ways. Everything, as I mentioned, we do is logged as long as it can be publicly logged. Of course, some actions like these already mentioned, deletions of abusive content, for example, these oversight suppress actions, they're not publicly logged. But everything else has public logs. You can find the link on the slide later here. And this is also gathered to make transparent how active stewards are. I'm a little bit focused on working particularly on these things that are not publicly logged, but there are definitely fellows of mine who are much more active, who are logging, blocking accounts much more often. You can see here the example query on what they do. Because of the fact that not everything can be logged publicly, for example, these looking behind accounts, functionality check user, we have additional pages where it's transparently logged what we did, how often we did something. I also mentioned the Stewards user group. If you're interested in reading through reports of what we do annually, I'm writing these reports. For me, it's super interesting to see what my dear fellows are doing, how many emails they work on. Emails usually where users complain about actions we do, help out there, how many messages we share among each other, like 11,000 messages between each other, and many more. So really a lot of work, a lot of things you have to keep in mind when you do things. And of course, we are still human beings. We do make mistakes, and but we should treat our mistakes seriously and adapt our behavior if things go wrong. But if things go wrong, this has to be mentioned. So there's a need for like removing stewards, and of course there's an inactivity rule. But the more important point, this link is wrong, I'll change it later, are the global confirmations. Every year, nowadays in February, March, when new stewards are elected. At the same time, the confirmation of stewards, acting stewards, is open, and everyone in the global community is invited to share their feedback on how the stewards acted in the past year. So for me, uh, heading to my 20th anniversary, I already had like 18 confirmations. I'm used to feedback. That's fine. Um, and I hope that I didn't do too many big mistakes. I did, I can say this, I'll do things wrong at some point, but never so seriously that people really, too many people ask for my removal. One excursus here, what students also are supposed to do, which I'm not so happy because, well, it's not really what we usually do. So whenever you locally have a problem, which is not conduct related, because conduct related issues usually end up at the U4Cs, at the Universal Code of Conduct Coordinating Committee, you will end up on MetaWiki, and you can start your request for comments there and ask the global community for feedback. But it's not that easy to reach the global community. There are banners, of course, and mass messages, but it's so like global, so RFCs on MetaWiki that handle local issues have to be promoted in a different ways. It's complicated to gather people for feedback on MetaWiki in particular, because it's mostly in English. We will later have that topic. This as well is a place, the RFCs and MetaWiki, that are consensus driven, but there's no individual decision of the closing party. But somebody has to make an end to this. When there are problems between wikis, for example, or governance issues within wikis, and these can only be closed by MetaWiki admins and stewards. And in a few cases, also by stewards only. However, it's not very clear how binding these decisions or like closures are. So it's like another task of a steward. But yeah, I wish there would be another way to gather the global community on solving issues beyond behavioral issues. Good. The next myth is coming. And one that you're probably particularly interested in. Me too. Had presentations about this topic, diversity of stewards, a few times, and yeah, it's not getting much better. So, but still, well, we're serving the global community. 1,000 Wikimedia wikis are handled by stewards, mostly the small wikis, 800 smallest wikis. Nevertheless, you might say, well, then stewards should be at least a globally diverse group, and they should also be entitled to help with all the local problems. And yeah, you already guess what's coming. Myth busted. That's not the case, sadly. There are only 40 stewards globally. I already mentioned that. And if you look at all the languages we have and all the countries in our globe, then this is not sufficient. We have the issue of language. I'm talking English with you. Yeah, we'll later see why this is the case. And as you already heard, the scope for actions is pretty limited. We cannot help with all problems. But let's see, take a look at this pretty sad world map created by my Steward fellow Epic. You can see the green countries, countries colored in green, that have stewards as of now. And you can see the yellow countries that used to have stewards, and all the red countries that never had a steward. And you see a continent that almost never had stewards, and also in Asia, you almost have no stewards. Very few from Latin America, and I will tell you why this is the case, why we have this very sad situation. And we'll share some ideas how we can change that, or at least what is the path to change that. At first, there are formal reasons. Here on the right is a screenshot from the prerequisites of the steward elections. And then the main issue or main factor for that is that steward candidates must have or have hold admin rights on a local wiki. And you're probably aware of the fact that on many wikis, there is a lack of administrators. The number of administrators is shrinking almost everywhere, a few exceptions. So the lack of local administrators leads to the limited number of stewards. You might say now, well, why don't you change that? But you have already heard that there are a lot of powerful tools stewards can use, and having experience as an administrator is definitely needed to manage the tools as a steward. So I encourage the Wikimedia Foundation and larger chapters, larger affiliates to encourage their communities to apply for local rights. And in the last part of this presentation, I will share with you how, what the steps are to go these ways. Not only this formal reason of having admin rights on a local wiki or global sysop rights for at least 3 months. Voters are often asking for previous experience in the area of work of stewards, which is mostly cross-wiki anti-vandalism activities, which is why I mentioned previously global rollback or global admin rights. Having these experiences with you often gives you additional pros in the candidatures. And of course, if you have a name that is familiar to others, that will help. When I became a steward, I was admin on German and English Wikipedia, and a majority of voters knew my name. It was still close for me. 80% is the threshold. You have to reach 80% support to become a steward. I had 81%. Yeah. So being accessed from MetaWiki, real-life connections will definitely also help you to be visible as a good steward candidate. Beyond that, there are functional reasons. Having listened closely to my presentation, you might have noticed that stewards are working on highly specialized tasks. So many stewards of us handle spam bots, have some familiarity with the technical backgrounds of how spam bots are working, open proxies, virtual private networks, and these topics. If they are not familiar with these, it get tricky to work as a steward in this particular area. Handling non-public data and libel can also be for these previous experience would be helpful. And these tasks are often requested or posted in English language, and by this limit the pool of candidates naturally. For me, which is why I have the screenshot here, I'm off when I'm online on my volunteer laptop, then I'm patrolling all the global registrations of profiles. And here you can see one censored account, and I get information on that. And I step in and go to the link there, and then I lock this account, or if it's even getting worse, I block it. But the account FGH, etc. So like a random amount of letters, that's not part of the global policies. I'm not entitled to block this account, although I assume this is not a user that will do helpful tasks on our wikis. So like patrolling incoming abuse, you need time for that as well. And yeah, so a few more functional reasons I mentioned here. So you can see these are still pretty soft problems that you can see here in the screenshot, but of course there are also heavy attacks on other users, like disclosures of private addresses, for example. Handling tricky situations can be challenging. Stewards have a lot of things to do, are not very visible globally, receive limited appreciation. My activity is very appreciated. For example, the Comedian of the Year, but it's like most of the time stewards are doing tens of thousands of edits that are sometimes not even logged publicly or not visible to the global community, to help the global community not to deal with these. So we're in the background working so that you on local wikis can work without these disruptions. Yeah, and with this in mind, lots of work often leads to early resignation. So I'm now here for almost 20 years, and there are a few more that are serving 10 plus years. But I noticed that it is challenging mentally to new stewards who are very eager to work and deal with all the problems. But if you get a lot of load, sometimes get overloaded, and there's some stewards who then sadly resign. So there's a change. To sum this up, candidates must be resilient and bold to apply and bold to take responsibility for the tricky parts, and due to the nature of some activities and the non-disclosure agreements I had to sign, I cannot say everything we do, but we also handle the very, very difficult cases that are usually not public. But this can also be bothering. Looking a little bit more on the language barriers. Well, by default, or like initially, MetaWiki is multilingual. There is a translation extension enabled. And when I prepared this presentation, I really was concerned, confused, why we have some help pages localized, for example, not the request pages. And for me, I tried to explain that to myself because of the fact that stewards only understand a limited number of languages, and with the information in mind that we have no resources like the Universal Code of Conduct Committee to ask for translations, or we don't use external tools to use translations. It's the fact that all our request pages are English only. And there are also many different categories, and the request, as you can see here on the right, is pretty formal. What you have to put where to make the steward understand what you're actually asking for. So there, these are some of the limitations. Of course, we try to make it a little bit easier for you, but we are also just volunteers. We're doing this next to our regular work. But there's one good thing that I wanted to mention, the Stewards block wizard, created by Steward Fellow and was also translated into a few languages, but that's a place where you could help out, for example, with the help pages are already mentioned, but also with the block wizard, so that people who are blocked by us, and there are complaints about us when we block full providers, ISPs, in some regions, because there is abuse coming from these. Then there are also false positives, and people want to get unblocked. They want to contribute to Wikipedia and the sister projects. And yeah, with this wizard, we try to help users to reach us as fast as possible so that we can help in the best possible way to solve the problem. What else? Why is English lingua franca? Well, stewards communicate in English with each other all the time. The meetups here, our last meetup, steward conference in Amsterdam last year, is English only. Activities are documented in English on our private steward wiki, and all the chats we have with the foundation are in English too. Yeah. I go to the last myth and try to make it a little bit quicker. I know we're my part is almost on time. You're asking now, okay, stewards maybe a little bit tricky here to start helping out on this part, but maybe as a local administrator. But so I heard stewards assign local admin rights. So just hear those on the call now. Hey, Martin, you know me. I'm a good guy. Please give me these local admin rights, and I will help you, and then soon I'll be steward fellow. Of course, it's not that easy. Myth busted. Local admin rights are granted temporarily according to a clear process. But of course, new stewards are always welcome. I will not read everything that's here in the screenshot, but I want to make you aware that there are some rules for becoming administrator, that they are clearly documented on MetaWiki, but poorly localized. If you want to help out, it would be really helpful to help translate these pages so that other users understand how to become an administrator on a local wiki. And for us as a stewards, it's good that when they're local administrators, because they take away the work from us. If there are no local administrators, stewards will step in. If stewards don't speak the language, nonsense stays there. We can often just delete English nonsense or nonsense in languages we understand, so that it's really a big advantage if there are local administrators. And personally, I'm not that active in assigning user rights as a steward. It looks to me that the 3 months admin rights are pretty easily assigned when there's a request, when you make good statement on why it's necessary that you also help out as a temporary admin for 3 months at least in smaller wikis. You'll probably get that right. For longer times, like a local vote should happen with a minimum number of votes, etc. And permanent admin rights as well. But it's like the first step, I'd say, is doable. And then you will have these tools now. Just kidding, you will neither got Moppy here on the right nor the Wikipad, but you will get some tools that will help your local community with governing your wiki. I think last slide, yeah, is my approach to you. If you have taken these steps, and maybe not for the next steward election, but the one a year later, we're looking for stewards, definitely. And I want to have this situation changed with a very sad global map that I've showed, that we don't have stewards from many regions which are very active globally, but not visible in the highest governing body, the stewards, or the group. Yeah. But local activities are not sufficient. There should be an interest not only to help out on your local project, but also to help out cross-wiki with abuse on more than one wiki. And the first steps that I mentioned, global rollback and global systems, are really recommended. I also encourage you to take the elections very seriously. If you don't give good responses during the nomination phase, pretty likely that you will get opposes from users who are very active on MetaWiki, who know very well how all these things work. Yeah. Of course, you will be not alone when you become a steward. There are support mechanisms. So in the end, I can give you the advice again: be bold, take the first steps, ask for help. Stewards are extremely helpful from my perspective, but we have so much work to do globally that it sometimes can take a bit of time that we respond, but we are definitely here to help you with your local projects. Having said that, I'll also say thank you and look forward to your questions. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Audible and visible. I was facing some network issues. Thank you, Martin. You gave us a very clear look behind the curtain of steward operations today. And I also appreciated that you broke down the numbers for us. Hearing that there are only 40 stewards globally managing such high impact tasks, it puts the workload really into perspective for us. So I will bring in the participants in the conversation. We are opening the moderated Q&A, so please feel free to unmute yourself or put your questions in the chat. You can even raise your hand. I do believe we have given rights to everyone so that they can unmute themselves. Let me just check. Any questions from anyone? Please go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Martin. It's good to hear from you after having last heard at the Wikimedia Futures Lab. So I wanted to ask about the user group that you guys have. How functional do you think it is in terms of bringing new folks for the past 3 years? Because I've seen a lot of people becoming stewards in the past, like 2 years or so. So is it sort of a response of the outreach activities carried out by the user group, or it is probably the work that's just been done on Wiki itself? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Afi. So, manifold answer. The Wikimedia Stewards user group is not that active. It's not doing much of outreach. It's more like the group that we have if we need it for formal reasons. So usually stewards work independently, have monthly calls and such. Of course, every time elections are on their horizon, we asks ourselves who would be a good candidate, and we reach out to them. But for that, we need to see them at least on MetaWiki. You're right. In the past few years, the number of stewards has climbed again. So when I now said we're just 40, if you had asked me 3 years ago, I would have said we're just 30. So the number is increasing a little bit. The reasons for that, I'm not sure. So maybe it's thanks to some more visibility of this and sessions like this. I'm very grateful that I had the chance to give you insights into this, and I'm happy to do this everywhere. So it's other. So for me, it's also work of Steward, like visibility for stewards that is not logged anywhere. So people always complain you're doing too few actions, etc. And then I'm like, I'm going to this conference, I'm doing this and that, and of course that's also needs to be visible. And yeah, so I also think that especially in the past few years, in particular in the last year, the support from the Wikimedia Foundation with new tools has increased dramatically. Conversations with the foundation, especially with the team product safety and integrity, is very intensive. And when I started as a steward, I had to write my own Python scripts for global blogs, etc., and had to create user pages on all wikis, on each wiki individually. Now we have global user pages, and we have many more tools that help stewards. So it's getting more attractive to use all these tools. Could be a reason why there are a few more stewards nowadays. But with these tools, the level of technological requirements for stewards also increases dramatically. So when I started as a steward, I was like the expert on writing a bit of scripts and so on and so on. Now we have full-time developers who show up and can give you all the details about proxies and such. And I'm also there and say, yeah, nice. I understand it. I can help explain that to my local community, in Wikipedia, for example. Yeah, so it's like finding the right balance between very specialized and still open for new members is difficult, but it's this is fully unrelated to the question of like global diversity, because there are people everywhere on Earth who are tech experts and such. So it's really not a blocker for particular reasons that they're specialized tasks. The staffs at local admin, global rollback, steward, sysop, steward need to be taken. And yeah, and we're there to help you with these steps. I hope this answered. Super interesting and yeah, unexpected. But
We also have another request in the chat. If you can hold a session on tools and pages which admins can make use of.
I think that's one for you, Manetta. Of course, stewards can also talk about these, but yeah, we use admin tools, but having talked about subsidiarity, you should better ask local administrators which tools they use. But I also read between these lines that there is not so well documentation existing on what actually exists. The fun images I showed of the Wikipad with the buttons just gave you a glimpse on what admins can actually do. I really appreciate the efforts of the Wikimedia Foundation to gather these topics of users with extended rights. Now on Discord, there's a Discord channel for users with extended rights where they can share ideas. At Wikimedia, there will be users with extended rights convening once again. And I hope next year's visa issues will be less challenging. yeah, Wikimedia Europe's also always a little bit, yeah, frustrating in this regard, similar to like Steward. I'm very happy to work with stewards from everywhere.
This is wonderful. Yeah, we would also be sort of having, brief convening about extended users at this year's Wiki Conference India. So I think people have started taking it off from the last year's experiment at Nairobi. I recently heard about one in the Asia region. So probably, I think in the next few years, we could have more people with extended rights at all. And yeah, hoping for
So
the 40 to become probably 80 or something more because we need more stewards. Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate these efforts, and yeah, Germany historically overfunded. Had the chance to gather their admins since 2014. I think there's an admin con every year in the German language countries. But they're now also doing similar things in Poland and ISIAP, I've noticed as well. And only if you gather people on topics that are important to them, you can proceed, you make progress. And it's really good to have admin exchange, be it online or in person if possible.
Now we're at the end of the session. So looking back at everything we discussed, the path to contributing is more open than many realize. And the to gain the temporary administrator rights is a very well documented and accessible process. And especially our communities needs these fresh voices and the kind of resilience that helps us tackle complex and specialized tasks. And our entire system relies on volunteers stepping forward. And so if you have ever considered helping out on a broader scale, so as Martin emphasized, be bold and take that first step. So before we close this session officially, I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who made this session possible. First to you, Martin, we are grateful that you took the time to share your expertise with us. Thank you for making these complex global operations feel so much more approachable. And your dedication to the Wikimedia movement over the last 2 decades is deeply inspiring to all of us. I also want to send a huge shout out to the Indic Media Wiki user group. They generously provided us the access to Google Meet platform so that we could all gather here today. And to all of you, our participants, without your curiosity, sessions like these simply would not be possible. Your presence transformed these meetings into a vibrant community experience. So thank you for showing up, asking your questions, and helping us grow together. So please keep an eye on our communication channels for the next DCW Conversation Hour. We have noted your requests on the topics that you would like to see more from us, and we will take them into consideration. We also have a Telegram group. Let me just share the link of it in the chat, and you can share your feedback of the session today there with us. You can post questions, you can send in your suggestions. We would be delighted to have you join us in the group. Until then, stay inspired, stay curious, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.